Long before the glittering spires of cities rose above the earth, before empires carved continents into their dominions, there was only the raw, unrelenting wilderness. A world ruled not by law or art, not by kings or scholars, but by the simplest, cruelest rule: survival. Every dawn was a gamble. Every shadow could conceal death. Every discovery of a sharpened stone, a spark of fire, was a triumph that echoed across generations, even if its echo would remain silent, hidden beneath layers of mud and rock, until humans learned to unearth the story of their own beginnings. This is the world of prehistoric man. It is a world that stretches back millions of years, far beyond the memory of written history, before chronicles, hieroglyphs, or codices. In these vast expanses of time, humans were not yet humans in the full sense of the word. They were small-brained creatures, fragile, vulnerable, walking upright on two legs, yet still more ape than human. They were explorers in a world of predators and natural forces, adventurers in a landscape that demanded ingenuity for every breath, every meal, every step. We often imagine our ancestors as brutish figures, wandering blindly through a savage landscape. But the truth is far more extraordinary. Prehistoric humans were not mere survivors. They were inventors, planners, thinkers, and social animals. Each decision mattered. Every experiment with stone or fire, every tentative gesture of communication, every fleeting moment of curiosity was a step toward a consciousness that would one day give rise to civilization itself. Their story is, in every sense, the story of becoming human. In the earliest chapters of this story, there were no cities, no monuments, no written accounts. Only the land and its creatures, and the earliest humans were learning to navigate both. Africa, often called the cradle of humanity, was a continent of endless skies and sweeping savannas. Here, in the shadow of towering trees and beneath the gaze of distant mountains, the first hominins stumbled upright, leaving footprints that would one day tell tales of their journey. These footprints, fossilized in mud millions of years later, are some of the earliest testimonies of life seeking life, of consciousness beginning to emerge. The creatures that walked here, Sahelanthropus cadensis, Ororantugenensis, Australopithecus afarensis, were small, fragile, and dependent on instinct. Yet even in their modest forms, they bore the seeds of ingenuity. Their hands, though not yet perfect instruments, were capable of grasping, shaping, and experimenting. Their brains, small by modern standards, were beginning to form the complex architecture that would one day enable abstract thought, language, and culture. Survival demanded more than speed or strength. It demanded adaptation, observation, and a nascent intelligence that could interpret the dangers and resources of a world that was indifferent, even hostile, to their existence. Imagine the savanna, the golden grasses waving in the wind, the distant thunder of a herd of antelopes, the rustle of a lurking predator. For these early humans, life was a constant negotiation with danger. They were both predator and prey. They learned to recognize the tracks of lions and leopards, the calls of birds, and the signs of water sources. Their survival was intricately linked to the land, to the cycles of seasons, to the behaviors of animals, and to the whims of climate that could shift suddenly and without mercy. Each day demanded observation and decision. Failure was often fatal. Yet even amid this harshness, there was innovation. It was here, in this crucible of necessity, that the first tools emerged. Stones were chipped into sharp edges, sticks were fashioned into rudimentary spears, and over countless generations, small experiments accumulated into knowledge. Knowledge passed silently from one generation to the next, encoded not in writing, but in gestures, demonstrations, and imitation. A young hominin watching an elder chip stone to cut meat was participating in the earliest form of education. a lesson that would echo into the distant future. And then there was fire. Perhaps nothing marks the emergence of human ingenuity more profoundly than the discovery and control of fire. In its warmth, humans found comfort and safety. With it, they could cook food, drive away predators, and extend their days beyond the constraints of sunlight. Fire transformed the world from a place of constant threat into a stage for experimentation, storytelling, and social cohesion. Around the fire, early humans could gather, communicate, and plan. The sparks of flame were also sparks of thought, of imagination, of the mind reaching beyond immediate survival toward creativity and foresight. It is often tempting to reduce prehistoric humans to silhouettes against the cave walls of our imagination, to think of them as simple beings whose lives were defined entirely by hunger and fear. But the archaeological record tells a far more nuanced story. These were creatures capable of symbolic thought, as evidenced by early ornaments, pigments, and perhaps even ritual behaviors. They were creatures who began to understand the power of community, the importance of cooperation, and the potential of innovation. Their successes and failures laid the groundwork for the development of technology, culture, and ultimately, civilization itself. Prehistoric man was not a static figure. Over millions of years, evolution was both slow and unrelenting. Species rose and fell, adapted and vanished, leaving traces in bone, stone, and fossilized footprints. The story of humanity is therefore also the story of mortality and persistence. The survival of one generation depended on the ingenuity and care of the previous. Each CHC out a hunt, where to gather, when to flee was a thread in a vast tapestry whose outcome was uncertain. And yet, even in this uncertain world, a remarkable thing happened. Minds began to expand, curiosity began to flourish, and humans started to shape not only their environment, but also their future. Small-brain hominins became toolmakers. Toolmakers became fire users. Fire users became social strategists, planners, and eventually storytellers. Over countless millennia, the ability to imagine, to plan, to symbolize, and to communicate slowly transformed creatures of flesh and instinct into creatures of culture and thought. Tonight, we trace the footprints of this transformation. From the first tentative steps on African savannas to the intricate social networks of Neanderthals, from the earliest stone tools to the sparks of art that would one day decorate cave walls. This is the story of prehistoric man. It is a story of survival, yes, but also of ingenuity, of experimentation, and of the emergence of what we recognize as humanity itself. In the shadows of deep time, one can almost hear the whispers of our ancestors, the crunch of stone beneath foot, the crackle of fire in the darkness, the quiet conversation of early humans passing knowledge from one generation to the next. These whispers remind us that every human achievement, every city, every painting, every song rests on the fragile, daring, and brilliant foundation laid by beings who lived in a world far harsher than our own, yet full of potential and discovery. This is the story that has been buried under the soil for millions of years, waiting for us to uncover it. It is a story not only of survival, but of becoming human. Becoming thinkers, dreamers, and creators. The story of prehistoric man is, in the truest sense, the story of us all. These early hominins were creatures walking upright, yet still bearing traits reminiscent of the apes from which they had diverged. Their brains were small, ranging from about 300 to 500 cubic centimeters, barely a third the size of a modern human brain. But even then, nature had imbued them with a remarkable capacity, the ability to adapt. They were the pioneers of bipedal locomotion, learning to balance, to hunt, to forage, and to navigate a world that could turn deadly in a heartbeat. Among the earliest of these species was Sahelanthropus cadensis, living approximately 7 million years ago in the regions that are now Chad. Fossil evidence reveals a creature with a small, ape-like brain, but features hinting at bipedalism. These first upright walkers left footprints on the savannas that would later fossilize, whispering to us across deep time of a world entirely alien yet foundational. Another species, Auroran tugenensis, dating to roughly 6 million years ago, provides further insight into the slow, deliberate experimentation of evolution. Their leg bones suggest a habitual upright gait, a critical step toward freeing the hands for tool use, carrying, and manipulating, the earliest signs of what would distinguish humans from all other creatures. Then came the more famous Australopithecus afarensis, exemplified by the fossil known as Lucy, discovered in Ethiopia in 1974. Lucy lived around 3.2 million years ago and stood about 1.1 meters tall. She walked upright, yet her brain was still small, around 400 to 500 cubic centimeters. She was capable of climbing trees for safety, but also of navigating the open plains where predators lurked. Life for her kind was perilous. Lions, hyenas, and crocodiles were constant threats. But it was this struggle that honed their instincts, creativity, and resilience. They were the first to leave tangible marks on their world, not through art or architecture, but through footprints, tool use, and the persistent exploration of their environment. Daily life for these early humans was a negotiation with risk. Food was never guaranteed. The landscape demanded constant vigilance. Water sources had to be found, berries and roots identified, and animals tracked. They were not merely surviving. They were learning, observing, and experimenting with the tools that evolution had given them. Their hands, delicate yet precise, began to manipulate stones and sticks, laying the groundwork for the tool-making revolution that would follow. Their eyes, attuned to subtle changes in the environment, tracked prey, predators, and the shifts of the seasons. And their minds, though primitive by our standards, began to form the cognitive frameworks that would later support language, culture, and abstract thought. The archaeological record tells us much about their ingenuity. Fossilized remains of stone tools from roughly 3.3 million years ago, predating Homo habilis, suggest that Australopithecines may have shaped basic flakes for cutting or scraping. These early tools were simple, yet revolutionary. A sharp-edged stone could open up new dietary possibilities, allow access to marrow, or defend against smaller predators. Such tools were more than survival implements. They were the first tangible evidence of intentionality, of thought influencing the physical world. And yet, for all their ingenuity, life remained unforgiving. Predation was a daily threat. Group cooperation was not optional, it was essential. Early hominins likely lived in small bands, relying on numbers for protection, sharing food, and teaching survival skills to the young. Social bonds, cooperation, and observation were their greatest assets, even more than physical strength or speed. Each generation passed on lessons learned, ensuring that knowledge accumulated, not lost. In this way, humanity's story began to be written long before the invention of writing itself. Fossil evidence also provides glimpses into their health, mortality, and daily struggles. Many Australopithecine skeletons show signs of injuries, fractures, infections, and the wear of a hard life, hinting at both vulnerability and resilience. Surviving into adulthood was a remarkable achievement. Caring for injured or sick members of a group may have been an early form of empathy and cooperation, traits that would come to define humanity. These small acts, repeated across millennia, built the social foundation upon which complex societies would one day rise. Climate played a critical role in shaping their evolution. Africa's landscape shifted dramatically over millions of years, alternating between dense forests and open savannas. These changes demanded adaptability. Species that could not adjust vanished. The open savannas favored bipedal locomotion and cooperative hunting, while forests required climbing skills and foraging ingenuity. Early humans were not static. They moved, experimented, and adapted to survive. Migration, even on a small scale, became a mechanism for survival and genetic diversity. Beyond the physical and environmental pressures, there were also the beginnings of mental and social sophistication. While we cannot know the thoughts of Australopithecines, the archaeological record offers tantalizing hints. Marks on bones, rudimentary tools, and the spatial arrangement of living spaces suggest an awareness of cause and effect, a capacity to plan, and perhaps even proto-symbolic thought. These early humans were not yet speaking, painting, or building monumental structures, but they were thinking slowly, experimentally, and cumulatively. In contemplating the dawn of humanity, one is struck by the tension between fragility and resilience. These creatures were physically weak by comparison to many predators, mentally limited by modern standards, yet their ability to observe, innovate, and cooperate allowed them to survive where others perished. The first footprints of upright walkers are more than impressions in mud. They are the echoes of a species learning to negotiate the world, to leave a mark, and to lay the foundation for something far greater than themselves. As we trace this story, we must also confront the profound mystery of evolution. Millions of years pass almost imperceptibly in the fossil record, yet each step mattered. The emergence of bipedalism, the manipulation of tools, and the development of social bonds were each a monumental achievement in the slow dance of survival. These hominins did not know that their descendants would one day paint magnificent scenes in caves, create complex languages, or reshape the planet. They only knew the immediate: hunger, thirst, danger, and the fleeting triumphs of ingenuity. And yet, it is within this immediacy that the essence of humanity was forged. The first humans did not inherit culture. They created it incrementally and experimentally. They learned from failure, innovated under pressure, and slowly transformed instinct into intelligence. Their lives were small in the span of geological time, but their impact of the evolutionary, cognitive, and cultural foundations they laid would resonate across millions of years. So as we peer into the dawn of humanity, we see a world both alien and familiar. The landscapes have changed, the species have evolved or vanished, yet the struggle, the ingenuity, and the drive to survive remain deeply human. The dawn of humanity is a story of risk and reward, of fragile creatures learning to manipulate stone, fire, and the social bonds that would one day give rise to civilization. It is a story of emergence, of experimentation, and of hope against the odds. Tonight, as we continue our journey, we leave behind the comforting certainties of modern life. We step into a world where every day is a test, where survival demands creativity and courage, and where the very idea of humanity was being written in footprints, stones, and fleeting acts of ingenuity. This is the dawn of humanity, the story of our ancestors' first steps, first tools, and first glimpses of consciousness is a story of becoming human, in the truest and most profound sense. Homo habilis inhabited the savannas, woodlands, and river valleys of East and Southern Africa. Fossil sites such as Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, Kubi Fora in Kenya, and Sterkfontein in South Africa reveal not only their bones, but also the tools they left behind. Their brains were larger than those of Australopithecines, ranging from 510 to 600 cubic centimeters, small by modern standards, but significant enough to support problem-solving, social coordination, and experimentation. They were no longer merely reacting to the world. They were beginning to shape it, manipulating their environment to increase their chances of survival. Central to Homo habilis' identity was the creation and use of stone tools, part of what archaeologists classify as the Oldowan toolkit. These were simple yet revolutionary. Sharp flakes struck from cores of rock, used to cut meat, scrape hides, or fracture bones to access marrow. In these flakes, we see the first deliberate attempts to extend human capability beyond the limits of the body. A sharp stone transformed the way they ate, hunted, and defended themselves. It allowed them to consume food that others could not, to extract nutrients that conferred energy for survival and reproduction. Each tool was not only a physical instrument, but also a cognitive milestone, a tangible expression of thought shaping reality. Homo habilis toolmaking was not random. Evidence suggests planning, foresight, and teaching. A young individual watching an elder strike stone to produce a cutting edge was engaged in the earliest known form of apprenticeship. Knowledge was no longer encoded solely in instinct or imitation. It began to be passed from one generation to the next, accumulating slowly over time. The hands of Homo habilis were evolving to be more dexterous, the mind to be more flexible, and the social bonds to be more cooperative. These developments would lay the foundation for the dramatic expansions of Homo erectus and, eventually, Homo sapiens. Life for Homo habilis was precarious. They faced predators both large and small, saber-toothed cats, hyenas, crocodiles, and packs of wild dogs prowled the plains. Their strategy for survival was not brute strength, but cunning, cooperation, and innovation. By observing animal behavior, identifying plant resources, and sharing knowledge within social groups, they began to exploit ecological niches that other species could not. They were both predators and scavengers, opportunistic yet intelligent, navigating a landscape where failure was often fatal. Dietary adaptations also played a crucial role in Homo habilis' success. Fossil evidence shows a flexible omnivorous diet: meat, fruits, nuts, tubers, and roots. The ability to process meat using tools provided essential proteins and calories, fueling brain growth and supporting complex social behaviors. Hunted animals were not always captured in groups, but scavenged from carcasses left by larger predators. This opportunism demanded careful observation, timing, and courage, qualities that distinguish human intelligence from mere animal instinct. Social structure among Homo habilis was likely complex for its time. Small bands of 20 to 50 individuals may have lived together, sharing resources, defending against threats, and teaching survival skills. Cooperation was not optional, it was essential. Individuals who failed to contribute risked starvation or predation. Such pressures likely selected for increased social intelligence, the ability to read others' intentions, to plan collectively, and to maintain bonds of trust. Over millennia, these pressures honed cognitive abilities that would underpin language, culture, and human society. Homo habilis also offers the first hints of symbolic thought. While no cave paintings or figurines have been definitively attributed to this species, their tool selection and production suggest a mind capable of abstraction, understanding cause and effect, anticipating outcomes, and experimenting to refine technique. A sharp-edged flake was more than a tool. It was a conceptual breakthrough, the recognition that a stone, struck in a particular way, could solve a problem that hands alone could not. Their environment, too, was in constant flux. East Africa underwent shifts between forest, woodland, and savanna over thousands of years, demanding adaptability. Homo habilis responded not only with ingenuity, but also with mobility, moving across landscapes in search of food and safety. Migration, even on a local scale, enhanced genetic diversity and spread innovations. These migrations may have brought them into contact with other hominin species, sparking competition, exchange, or hybridization, the first whispers of the complex human networks that would define our species' later evolution. The Oldowan tools themselves, though primitive to modern eyes, reveal something extraordinary about Homo habilis' cognitive evolution. Archaeologists have found evidence that specific stones were selected for their shape, density, and fracture patterns. Cores were systematically struck to produce multiple flakes, a technique that required planning and precision. This is the earliest evidence that humans were not only responding to their environment, but actively shaping it to meet their needs. Each tool is a silent testament to experimentation, observation, and the slow accumulation of knowledge, the earliest steps toward culture. Fire, however, was still beyond their control. Homo habilis may have scavenged natural fires, using the embers left by lightning strikes or volcanic activity, but controlled fire would not appear until Homo erectus. Yet, even without fire, Homo habilis was redefining the human relationship with the environment. By extending dietary options, cooperating in groups, and shaping tools, they had already begun the transformation from animal to cultural being. Fossil evidence also hints at health, injury, and resilience. Some skeletons show healed fractures, suggesting care within social groups. Surviving injury required cooperation, empathy, and planning. These small acts of social intelligence were crucial for survival, allowing knowledge, protection, and skills to persist across generations. Homo habilis, in this sense, represents the birth of social responsibility and an early recognition that the success of the individual is tied to the success of the group. Homo habilis' story is not only one of survival, but also of experimentation and learning. They were innovators navigating an uncertain world, constantly adjusting strategies, tools, and behaviors to survive. Each success was incremental, each failure instructive. Over time, this cumulative knowledge laid the foundation for more advanced hominins. In a very real sense, Homo habilis represents the first conscious attempt to master the environment, to bend nature toward human ends, and to transform instinct into intelligence. As we contemplate the world of Homo habilis, we can imagine their small bands moving through the African plains, striking stones to create tools, scanning the horizon for predators, gathering tubers, sharing knowledge, and teaching the young. Every action, every experiment, every carefully shaped stone was a step toward the future, a bridge from primal instinct to cultural sophistication. In the larger story of humanity, Homo habilis is often overlooked, sandwiched between Australopithecines and the more famous Homo erectus. Yet their significance cannot be overstated. They marked the first deliberate manipulation of the environment, the first true toolmakers, and the first hominins whose lives were shaped not only by survival, but by foresight, planning, and social cooperation. They are the ancestors who began the slow, patient journey from flesh and instinct toward mind and culture. And so, as we trace their footsteps across the savannas of Africa, we see not just primitive humans, but innovators, thinkers, and social beings, laying the groundwork for all that is to come. Homo habilis is more than a species. They are a symbol of human potential, the first tangible evidence that intelligence, ingenuity, and cooperation could tilt the balance against the raw forces of nature. This is the age of the handyman, the first toolmaker, the first conscious shaper of destiny. Their story reminds us that what distinguishes humans from all other creatures is not merely strength or speed, but the willingness to think, experiment, cooperate, and innovate. In the hands of Homo habilis, a simple stone became more than rock. It became the first instrument of human mastery, the first tool in a story that would span millions of years and culminate in the civilization we know today. Asterisk as millennia passed, evolution once again nudged humanity toward a new frontier. From the humble ingenuity of Homo habilis emerged Homo erectus, a being taller, stronger, and far more daring, whose journey would stretch across continents and reshape the human relationship with the world. Homo erectus, which translates to upright man, lived roughly 1.9 million to 110,000 years ago and represents one of the most consequential chapters in our prehistoric saga. Homo erectus was no longer confined to the African savannas. They were the first hominins to venture far beyond their birthplace, migrating into the vast landscapes of Europe, Asia, and the islands of Southeast Asia. Fossils and archaeological evidence in sites such as Dmanisi in Georgia, Zakutian in China, and Sangiran in Indonesia reveal a species adapted for endurance, capable of long-distance travel and resourceful survival in a variety of climates. Their robust physiques were taller, with longer legs and narrower hips than Homo habilis, making them efficient walkers and runners. They could traverse great distances, follow animal herds, and explore new habitats, laying the foundation for the global spread of humanity. Perhaps the most transformative achievement of Homo erectus was the mastery of fire. While earlier hominins may have scavenged embers from natural fires, Homo erectus became the first species to deliberately control fire. This single innovation reshaped every aspect of their existence. Fire provided warmth against the cold of expanding territories, protection from predators, light to extend their days, and a means to cook food, making it more digestible and nutritious. The controlled use of fire is one of the earliest indications of advanced planning, foresight, and cognitive sophistication, the first clear evidence that humans were beginning to impose their will on nature rather than merely reacting to it. Homo erectus tools were also a leap forward. Archaeologists classify their toolkit as Acheulean, characterized by bifacial hand axes, cleavers, and scrapers, often carefully shaped for specific tasks. Unlike the flake-based Oldowan tools of Homo habilis, Acheulean implements demonstrate foresight, standardization, and the capacity for abstract thought. These tools allowed Homo erectus to butcher large game, process plant materials, and perhaps even construct rudimentary shelters. Tool-making was no longer a simple response to immediate need. It was a deliberate activity requiring planning, technique, and skill passed down through generations. Life, however, was still unforgiving. Homo erectus faced predators, natural disasters, and fluctuating climates. The expansion into new territories exposed them to unfamiliar dangers: icy winters in northern latitudes, tropical rains in Southeast Asia, and arid plains elsewhere. Survival depended not only on physical prowess, but also on intelligence, cooperation, and cultural innovation. Groups may have consisted of 30 to 50 individuals, sharing knowledge, resources, and protection. The demands of life in these new environments likely accelerated cognitive development, social complexity, and the capacity for innovation. Dietary flexibility was critical to their success. Homo erectus was omnivorous, consuming meat, roots, tubers, fruits, and nuts. Hunting likely combined both ambush strategies and scavenging, while the introduction of fire allowed them to cook, which enhanced caloric intake and supported the growth of a larger brain. Nutrition, in combination with mobility and tool use, made Homo erectus a formidable and adaptable species. Fossil evidence also offers glimpses into their social life. At sites like Zakutian, some individuals appear to have survived severe injuries, suggesting care within the group. Homo erectus may have been the first species to demonstrate sustained altruism tending to injured or weak members, a behavior that would become a hallmark of human societies. These acts of empathy and cooperation were not only ethical but practical. The survival of the group depended on the survival of its individuals. Their migration into Europe, Asia, and Indonesia marked humanity's first global exploration. At Dmanisi in Georgia, Homo erectus fossils dating to 1.8 million years ago demonstrate that this species was capable of adapting to temperate climates, enduring cold winters, and exploiting new ecological niches. In Indonesia, Homo erectus crossed water barriers to reach islands like Java, suggesting a rudimentary understanding of navigation or opportunistic dispersal along coastlines. This was a species that would not be confined. They sought, experimented, and conquered unfamiliar worlds. Fire and tools were intertwined with social and cognitive growth. Meanwhile, gathering around fires may have enabled proto-communication, the first steps toward language. Sharing cooked meals promoted social bonds and planning. Tool production required teaching, imitation, and shared knowledge, the earliest signs of culture. Homo erectus was not merely surviving. They were beginning to construct society, to shape their environment cognitively and socially, laying a foundation for the symbolic thought that would flourish in later species. Climate change and environmental pressures influenced their adaptation. During the Pleistocene, glaciers advanced and retreated, and forests expanded and contracted. Homo erectus responded by altering migration patterns, experimenting with diets, and perhaps even modifying shelters. Archaeological evidence hints at the first rudimentary shelters, caves, rock overhangs, and simple windbreaks showing foresight and planning. These early dwellings may have served as communal spaces for protection, tool production, and social interaction, further enhancing cognitive and cultural evolution. Homo erectus technological advances also suggest the earliest forms of material culture. Hand axes, cleavers, and scrapers were not merely functional. Their consistent shapes indicate aesthetic choices, symmetry, and attention to detail. These tools reflect a mind capable of abstract thought, of envisioning an end product before acting. They demonstrate that Homo erectus was not simply reacting to the world, but actively shaping it according to intention. While they had mastered many aspects of survival, Homo erectus still faced limits. Their communication, though likely more complex than that of Homo habilis, was not yet language as we know it. Their cultural practices were rudimentary, and symbolic expression remained minimal. Yet, within these constraints, they exhibited remarkable ingenuity. Their innovations in mobility, fire use, tool-making, and social cooperation would endure across hundreds of thousands of years, forming a template for future species, including Homo sapiens. The success of Homo erectus is also measured by longevity. This species persisted for nearly 2 million years, far longer than modern Homo sapiens has existed so far. Their endurance testifies to their adaptability, intelligence, and social sophistication. By venturing beyond Africa, experimenting with fire, refining tools, and fostering cooperation, Homo erectus transformed the challenges of existence into opportunities for growth and survival. In contemplating Homo erectus, we see the emergence of the first truly global human explorer, a species that dared to leave the familiar, to challenge the unknown, and to master elements of the natural world previously beyond their control. They were architects of survival, engineers of tools, and early cultivators of culture. Each fire sparked, each hand axe shaped, and each step across unknown terrain represents the remarkable intersection of biology, intelligence, and ingenuity. And so, as we trace their journey across continents, we witness a species that transformed life itself. From Africa to Europe, from temperate valleys to icy highlands, Homo erectus was the first human to see the world as a stage for possibility, not merely a threat to endure. Their legacy is etched in stone tools, charred remains of fire, and the enduring human drive to explore, innovate, and shape our destiny. Homo erectus reminds us that humanity is defined not just by survival, but by curiosity, foresight, and the courage to venture into the unknown. In their hands, stones became tools, fire became a weapon against nature, and the world became a canvas for human ingenuity. They were not yet modern humans, but they were the first explorers of humanity's potential, the ones who began to stretch the limits of the species beyond its origins, setting the stage for the remarkable cognitive, cultural, and social evolution that would follow. As the planet's climate shifted, new challenges demanded new adaptations. In the icy expanses of Europe and parts of Western Asia, a species emerged uniquely suited to the harshness of the Ice Age, the Neanderthals. Living roughly between 400,000 and 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals, Homo neanderthalensis, were often misrepresented in popular imagination as brutish, dim-witted cavemen. Yet the archaeological and fossil record reveals a species sophisticated, resourceful, and deeply human in intellect and emotion, whose mastery of cold environments offers one of the most compelling chapters in the story of prehistoric man. Neanderthals were stockily built, with robust frames, barrel-shaped chests, and shorter limbs, physical adaptations that conserved heat and strength in freezing climates. Their bones reveal extraordinary muscle attachments, indicating strength far beyond that of modern humans. Yet their survival depended not merely on physicality, but on strategy, ingenuity, and foresight. They were hunters, but also scavengers, foragers, and makers of tools and clothing, whose intelligence allowed them to flourish in regions where lesser adapted species could not. This is probably the most remarkable innovation was the development of highly specialized tools. Classified as the Mysterian toolkit, these implements were more refined than those of Homo erectus or Homo habilis. Flakes, scrapers, points, and hand axes were carefully shaped for specific tasks: processing hides, butchering animals, woodworking, and crafting implements for hunting. The sophistication of these tools demonstrates that Neanderthals were capable of advanced planning, problem-solving, and skill transmission, in hallmarks of cultural and cognitive evolution. Hunting large game was central to Neanderthal survival. They pursued mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, bison, and reindeer, often in coordinated groups. Evidence of strategic ambushes, close-range hunting, and systematic butchering shows not only intelligence, but also cooperation and social coordination. Unlike solitary predators, Neanderthals relied on teamwork, planning, and communication, an early testament to the social complexity that would define humans. Fire, as with Homo erectus, played a vital role. Neanderthals controlled fire to cook, warm their shelters, and protect themselves from predators. They constructed hearths within caves and open-air sites, demonstrating not only technical mastery, but also an understanding of communal living. The fire became a social hub, a place to cook, to rest, to share stories, and to transmit knowledge across generations. In this way, fire was not just a tool for survival, but a catalyst for social cohesion, culture, and cognitive development. Their dwellings ranged from caves to temporary shelters made of wood and hides, evidence of sophisticated construction adapted to climate and landscape. These shelters protected from storms, wind, and predators, allowing Neanderthals to endure winters that would have been fatal to less well-adapted species. Archaeologists have found evidence of bedding made from leaves and grasses, indicating concern for comfort, hygiene, and warmth, a subtle reflection of cognitive and social sophistication. The Neanderthal diet was flexible and opportunistic. While large-game hunting dominated, they also consumed plants, nuts, seeds, and seafood when available. Analysis of isotopes in fossilized bones reveals regional variation in diet, indicating adaptability and knowledge of local environments. Their capacity to exploit diverse food sources reflects intelligence, observation, and innovation, essential traits for surviving in unpredictable climates. Beyond tools and diet, Neanderthals exhibited remarkable social and cultural complexity. They cared for the sick and injured. Skeletons with healed fractures or debilitating conditions suggest that individuals were tended to for years, a behavior requiring empathy, cooperation, and planning. Burial practices further indicate symbolic thinking. Graves, sometimes accompanied by flowers, pigments, or tools, suggest awareness of mortality. And ritualistic behavior, a cognitive leap toward abstraction, reflection, and cultural identity. Recent evidence even suggests that Neanderthals may have engaged in artistic and symbolic expression. Pigments, engravings, and personal ornaments hint at aesthetic sensibility and possibly communication through symbolic systems. They were not the mindless brutes often depicted. They were innovators, capable of imagination, reflection, and shared cultural practices. Communication among Neanderthals likely involved vocalization, gestures, and perhaps early forms of language. Anatomical studies of the hyoid bone and inner ear structures suggest that Neanderthals could produce a range of sounds comparable to modern humans, enabling complex social interaction, coordination during hunting, and the transmission of knowledge. Social cohesion was critical. Survival depended on cooperation, teaching, and collective planning. Neanderthals also displayed technological innovation beyond stone tools. Evidence of hide processing, hafted tools, and even rudimentary adhesives for toolmaking shows remarkable ingenuity. They were capable of manipulating their environment, combining materials, and creating tools that extended their physical and cognitive reach. These behaviors demonstrate foresight, experimentation, and cumulative knowledge foundations of culture and civilization. Adaptation to harsh climates required intelligence, strategy, and flexibility. Neanderthals survived multiple glacial periods, adjusting hunting practices, migration patterns, and shelter construction in response to shifting conditions. Their persistence across tens of thousands of years is a testament to their resilience, ingenuity, and ability to navigate environmental extremes. Interactions with anatomically modern humans, Homo sapiens, reveal further sophistication. Genetic evidence shows interbreeding, suggesting complex social interactions rather than simple competition. Neanderthals were not merely displaced. They contributed to the genetic and cultural makeup of modern humans, leaving a legacy encoded in the DNA of non-African populations today. In contemplating the life of Neanderthals, one sees a species defined not only by physical strength, but by mental acuity, social intelligence, and cultural innovation. They hunted, cared, taught, and innovated. Their survival was contingent on collaboration, empathy, and the deliberate manipulation of tools and environment. They were architects of their existence in the harshest conditions, shaping the world around them in ways that would echo into the evolution of Homo sapiens. Their extinction, approximately 40,000 years ago, does not diminish their significance. Neanderthals were not failures. They were highly successful adaptations to extreme environments, masters of survival, and precursors to the cultural and technological leaps of modern humans. They are a reminder that intelligence, culture, and humanity itself are not the exclusive domain of Homo sapiens. As we trace their story across caves and icy plains, we see a species both alien and familiar. Stoic, adaptive, inventive, and social, Neanderthals embody the enduring human spirit, the capacity to survive against the odds, to cooperate in groups, to innovate, and to reflect on life through culture and ritual. In their mastery of cold, their toolmaking, and their social complexity, they offer one of the richest lessons in the evolution of human cognition, society, and culture. The story of Neanderthals teaches us that survival is not merely a matter of strength or numbers. It is a matter of thought, creativity, cooperation, and resilience, qualities that define the very essence of humanity. They remind us that even in the harshest conditions, the seeds of culture, empathy, and innovation can flourish. In their lives, we find the echoes of our own, the drive to understand, to create, and to endure. Neanderthals, the masters of the cold, leave a legacy carved in stone, buried in caves, and encoded in the DNA of modern humans. They are the testament to what it means to be human: inventive, social, adaptive, and profoundly resilient. In their story, We see the blueprint for all that would follow for Homo sapiens, civilization, and the human journey across the globe. Asterisk. Around 300,000 years ago, a new chapter in the human story began. From the complex evolutionary experimentation of earlier hominins arose Homo sapiens, anatomically modern humans, whose brains, social sophistication, and imaginative capacities would forever transform the trajectory of life on Earth. These were not merely survivors. They were thinkers, creators, and pioneers, endowed with the mental, cultural, and physical abilities to reshape the world around them. Homo sapiens first emerged in Africa, in regions such as the Rift Valley and Southern Africa, where fossil evidence and archaeological sites illuminate the early stages of our species. Their brains averaged around 1,350 cubic centimeters, larger than any predecessor, supporting advanced cognition, problem-solving, and social interaction. But brain size alone does not tell the full story. It was the organization, flexibility, and connectivity of these brains that allowed for abstract thought, complex communication, and cultural innovation. From the outset, Homo sapiens displayed remarkable adaptability. They occupied diverse habitats, from savannas to woodlands, rivers to coasts, and eventually Arctic fringes. Their survival depended on innovative strategies, integrating hunting, gathering, tool use, and, crucially, social cooperation. This cooperation was not limited to immediate survival. It facilitated teaching, shared planning, and the creation of culture. In small bands of 25 to 50 individuals, knowledge accumulated, stories were shared, and traditions began to form the earliest threads of human civilization. Homo sapiens inherited many innovations from predecessors like Homo erectus and Neanderthals, stone tools, control of fire, and endurance hunting. Yet they expanded these capabilities exponentially. Tools became more specialized. Blades, points, scrapers, and composite tools emerged, designed for specific tasks such as hunting, hide processing, and woodworking. Evidence from sites like Blombo's Cave in South Africa demonstrates the use of pigments, engraved ochre, and symbolic artifacts dating back 100,000 years, revealing early symbolic thought and aesthetic sensibility. Humans were not just interacting with the environment. They were interpreting it, representing it, and embedding meaning into their actions. Cognition in Homo sapiens was transformative. Language, though difficult to trace directly, likely developed in its early stages, facilitating precise communication, planning, and social cohesion. Through language, knowledge could be transmitted accurately across generations. Hunting strategies, foraging techniques, and even social norms were preserved, refined, and expanded. Symbolic thought and storytelling allowed humans to imagine beyond immediate survival, to conceive of worlds, ideas, and futures not yet realized. One of the most striking aspects of Homo sapiens evolution was its interaction with other hominin species. As they migrated out of Africa around 70,000 years ago, they encountered Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia, Denisovans in Siberia, and possibly other, now extinct hominins in Asia. Genetic studies reveal interbreeding, leaving traces in the DNA of modern humans outside Africa. This was not merely competition, it was cultural and genetic exchange, blending survival strategies, knowledge, and traits that enhanced adaptability. The story of Homo sapiens is therefore intertwined with that of other species, a network of survival, innovation, and interaction. Migration was central to their story. Homo sapiens dispersed across continents, navigating deserts, forests, mountains, and icy tundras. Archaeological evidence shows human presence in Europe, Asia, Australia, and eventually the Americas, each migration demanding adaptation to new climates, food sources, and challenges. These journeys were not random wanderings. They were carefully calibrated strategies, informed by observation, social knowledge, and foresight. The success of these migrations underscores a defining trait of modern humans: cultural intelligence, the ability to solve novel problems using learned knowledge, shared experience, and innovation. Dietary practices evolved alongside tools and cognitive strategies. Homo sapiens were omnivorous, exploiting plants, seeds, fruits, tubers, and a variety of animals. Hunting became more sophisticated, often involving ambush, traps, and coordinated group strategies. Fishing and shellfish gathering expanded dietary options in coastal environments. The combination of dietary diversity and cooking allowed humans to extract maximum calories and nutrients, supporting brain development and social organization. Fire and cooking also transformed social structures, as communal hearths became centers of gathering, communication, and cultural practice. Homo sapiens' symbolic and artistic evolution represents a qualitative leap in cognitive sophistication. Cave paintings, carvings, figurines, and ornaments appear across continents, from Africa to Europe to Asia, often depicting animals, hunting scenes, and abstract patterns. These creations reveal not only aesthetic appreciation, but also abstract thinking, communication of ideas, and the emergence of cultural identity. Humans were no longer passive observers of the world. They interpreted and reshaped it mentally, embedding meaning and shared understanding into objects, rituals, and stories. Social structures grew increasingly complex. Bands evolved into networks, facilitating trade, exchange of knowledge, and cooperative strategies across distances. Early humans coordinated seasonal movements, shared information about resources, and maintained intergroup alliances in early forms of social networks. These interactions required negotiation, memory, and empathy, further stimulating cognitive and emotional development. Humans were building society not just physically, but mentally and culturally, creating frameworks that would persist for millennia. Technological innovation accelerated during this period. Homo sapiens developed advanced hunting weapons like bows, arrows, and spear throwers, increasing efficiency and safety. Tools were often composite, combining multiple materials: wood, stone, and bone, demonstrating foresight and problem-solving skills. Clothing, often made from hides and furs, protected diverse climates, allowing humans to inhabit extreme environments. These technological leaps were both responses to challenges and drivers of cultural complexity. The cognitive, cultural, and technological sophistication of Homo sapiens allowed them to dominate ecological niches, outcompeting other hominins and surviving environmental fluctuations. Yet their success was not guaranteed. Adaptability, cooperation, and innovation were constantly tested. The emergence of ritual, symbolic thought, and storytelling provided frameworks for social cohesion and knowledge transmission, reinforcing survival strategies. Cultural memory, encoded in artifacts, oral traditions, and symbolic behavior, became a force as powerful as biology itself. Evidence from sites such as Lascaux, Chauvet, and Blombos demonstrates not only technical skill, but also imagination, planning, and symbolic communication. Humans painted animals and hunting scenes, carved figurines, and created ornaments. These were not purely decorative. They expressed identity, conveyed knowledge, and strengthened social bonds. They were the first bridges between survival and meaning, between biology and culture. Homo sapiens' journey was ultimately one of cumulative evolution, blending inherited traits with innovative strategies, cultural learning, and social cooperation. Each discovery, whether a tool, a hunting strategy, or a symbol, was passed down, refined, and expanded. Knowledge became self-reinforcing, accelerating human progress in ways never seen before. The result was a species capable of profound adaptability, capable of surviving extremes, exploring new lands, and laying the foundations of civilization. In contemplating Homo sapiens, We see a species whose power lies not just in physicality, but in cognition, imagination, and social intelligence. They were the first humans capable of envisioning worlds beyond the immediate, of creating tools and culture to shape their environment deliberately. They did not merely adapt to nature. They began to redefine it according to human intention. From Africa, across deserts, forests, and mountains, to islands and continents far afield, Homo sapiens carried with them the legacy of millions of years of evolution. Their journey is a testament to the capacity of the human mind, the power of cooperation, and the unyielding drive to survive and thrive. In their migrations, their innovations, and their cultural expressions, we witness the emergence of modern humanity, a species no longer confined by instinct alone, but capable of shaping destiny through intellect, creativity, and shared knowledge. Homo sapiens stands at the intersection of biology, culture, and consciousness. They are the culmination of evolutionary experimentation, the inheritors of survival strategies honed over millions of years, and the architects of a future yet to unfold. Their story is one of resilience, innovation, and imagination, a story that continues to define what it means to be human. Asterisk, long before agriculture, cities, and empires, humans lived in a world defined by necessity and endurance. This was the Paleolithic era, the Old Stone Age, a period stretching from approximately 2.5 million to 10,000 years ago, during which humans honed the skills, knowledge, and ingenuity that would carry them across the globe. Life was a relentless struggle, and yet it was within this crucible that the foundations of culture, cooperation, and innovation were forged. The Paleolithic world was diverse and often harsh. Early humans inhabited savannas, forests, river valleys, tundras, and coastal zones. They encountered predators far stronger than themselves: saber-toothed cats, hyenas, giant bears, and packs of wolves prowled their landscapes. Climate swings brought freezing winters, torrential rains, and scorching summers. Survival depended not on raw strength alone, but on intelligence, observation, and adaptability. At the heart of Paleolithic survival was hunting and gathering. Humans tracked animals, observed seasonal migrations, and coordinated group hunts. Large prey, such as mammoths and bison, demanded strategy, communication, and cooperation. Hunting was not merely an act of survival. It was a complex social endeavor requiring shared planning, role differentiation, and anticipation of animal behavior. Smaller game and plant foods supplemented the diet, providing essential nutrients and stability when larger prey was scarce. Tools were central to daily life, evolving from simple flakes to sophisticated implements. Early Paleolithic tools, Oldowan flints, were crude but functional, used to cut meat, break bones, and scrape hides. Later, Acheulean hand axes and Mysterian flake tools allowed for specialized tasks, reflecting planning, dexterity, and cognitive advancement. By the Upper Paleolithic, humans created blades, scrapers, points, and composite tools combining bone, wood, and stone. These technological leaps extended physical capacity, enhanced hunting efficiency, and enabled adaptation to diverse environments. Each tool was a physical manifestation of human thought, a bridge between mind and world. Fire, first mastered by Homo erectus, became indispensable during the Paleolithic. Controlled fire transformed diets, enabling cooking, which increased nutritional value, reduced pathogens, and softened tough foods. Hearth provided warmth in frigid climates, light during long nights, and protection against predators. Fire also fostered social cohesion, gathering individuals in communal spaces for storytelling, teaching, and cultural expression. Around these hearths, the earliest social structures, knowledge transmission, and symbolic behaviors flourished. Life in the Paleolithic was also a study in adaptability. Humans responded to changing climates, migrating to follow food sources, exploiting new ecological niches, and experimenting with innovative survival strategies. Coastal populations harvested shellfish, fished, and utilized canoes. Highland communities mastered cold environments, crafting clothing from furs and hides. Across deserts, humans learned to locate water sources, track migratory animals, and preserve plant foods. This adaptability demonstrates not just physical resilience, but cognitive and cultural flexibility, key very traits that would define humanity. Social organization during the Paleolithic was crucial for survival. Humans lived in bands, typically 20 to 50 individuals, balancing cooperation with mobility. Within these groups, knowledge was shared, disputes resolved, and roles assigned. Elders and experienced hunters guided younger members, while caregivers tended the sick and injured. Evidence of healed fractures, long-term injuries, and care practices indicates empathy and planning, early manifestations of human social intelligence. Communication, whether through gestures, vocalization, or proto-language, allowed for coordination during hunts, sharing of environmental knowledge, and reinforcement of social cohesion. Paleolithic humans also began to engage in symbolic behavior and culture. Cave paintings, carvings, and ornaments emerged during the Upper Paleolithic, depicting animals, hunting scenes, abstract patterns, and possibly spiritual or ritualistic concepts. The act of creating symbols reflects complex cognitive processes, abstraction, imagination, memory, and communication. Cultural expression was not merely decorative. It was functional, reinforcing group identity, encoding knowledge, and enabling shared narratives across generations. Clothing and personal adornment illustrate another aspect of survival and culture. Early humans crafted garments from animal hides and plant fibers, providing insulation and protection. Ornaments, beads, and pigments served symbolic purposes, signaling identity, social status, or group affiliation. These artifacts reflect cognitive sophistication, planning, and social awareness, traits central to human evolution. Daily life in the Paleolithic was defined by movement, observation, and experimentation. Humans followed seasonal patterns of plants and animals, moving strategically across landscapes. They experimented with fire, tools, and foraging techniques, adjusting behaviors in response to environmental feedback. Knowledge was cumulative, preserved within social networks, and transmitted to younger generations. Each adaptation represented a calculated response to survival pressures, the emergence of culture, and the refinement of human cognition. Nutrition was diverse and strategic. While large-game hunting dominated certain regions, humans supplemented their diet with nuts, seeds, berries, roots, and fish. Foraging required deep knowledge of local ecosystems, understanding seasonal cycles, and discerning edible from toxic species. This dietary versatility enhanced resilience, reduced vulnerability to food scarcity, and supported brain development critical for the cognitive leaps that would define modern humans. Rituals and symbolic practices further enriched Paleolithic life. Burial of the dead, sometimes accompanied by grave goods, pigments, or flowers, reflects early religious or spiritual sensibilities. Such practices suggest awareness of mortality, social bonds, and cultural identity. Art, ornamentation, and ritualized behavior indicate that Paleolithic humans were not merely reacting to the environment. They were interpreting, communicating, and assigning meaning to their experiences. Technological innovation remained central. Spears, atlatls, spear throwers, bows, fishing implements, and composite tools increased hunting efficiency and safety. Toolkits diversified according to environment and subsistence needs. Coastal populations developed fishing technologies. Forest dwellers created traps. Highland groups refined cold weather gear. Each technological advance was a step toward controlling the environment and increasing survival probability, showcasing the human capacity for foresight, problem-solving, and creative adaptation. Paleolithic humans also cultivated social learning and teaching. Knowledge of tool-making, hunting strategies, and foraging was transmitted across generations. This cumulative culture allowed innovations to persist and improve, creating a feedback loop between cognition, social organization, and environmental mastery. Learning was experiential and collaborative, embedding survival skills and cultural knowledge in social memory. Despite the harshness of the Paleolithic world, humans exhibited play, leisure, and experimentation. Archaeological evidence of musical instruments, decorative pigments, and personal adornment suggests that life was not solely focused on survival. Humans were experimenting with creativity, social bonds, and symbolic communication, the first stirrings of what we recognize as culture. These behaviors enhanced group cohesion, facilitated knowledge transfer, and enriched human experience beyond mere subsistence. The Paleolithic era laid the foundation for all subsequent human evolution. Stone tools, fire mastery, social networks, dietary diversity, and symbolic expression became the scaffolding upon which later innovations, such as agriculture, settlements, and civilization, would be built. Humans emerged not just as survivors, but as strategic thinkers, innovators, and cultural beings, capable of shaping their environment and constructing meaning from existence itself. In tracing the life of Paleolithic humans, we see a world both brutal and brilliant. Each day demanded observation, strategy, and cooperation. Each tool, fire, and innovation was a deliberate response to necessity and opportunity. Through these experiences, humans developed cognition, social intelligence, and cultural expression, transforming survival into a narrative, a story, and eventually, civilization. The Paleolithic era reminds us that human evolution is not merely biological, but cultural and cognitive, that intelligence, cooperation, and innovation are as vital as strength, and that the seeds of society, art, and meaning were planted long before the dawn of agriculture. In the survival, creativity, and ingenuity of Paleolithic humans, we glimpse the origins of everything that defines humanity today. Among the flickering shadows of fires in Paleolithic caves, humans began to do more than survive. They began to imagine, create, and communicate. This period of cultural and symbolic evolution marked the transition from mere adaptation to the deliberate expression of thought, identity, and community. It is a story of a species beginning to understand itself, to project meaning onto the world, and to create the first echoes of culture that would resonate through millennia. As Homo sapiens spread across continents, they left traces not only in bones and tools, but in artifacts of imagination. Cave paintings, carvings, and personal ornaments emerged across Africa, Europe, and Asia, signaling a cognitive leap in abstract thought and symbolic behavior. Sites like Lascaux, Chauvet, Altamira, and Blombos reveal images of animals, hunting scenes, and abstract patterns created with pigments derived from ochre, charcoal, and manganese. These were not utilitarian markings. They were deliberate, artistic expressions, evidence that humans were beginning to conceptualize, communicate, and interpret their world symbolically. The choice of subjects in cave art is revealing. Predatory animals, bison, mammoths, and horses dominate these spaces, reflecting not only the environment, but perhaps ritualistic or spiritual significance. Some scholars propose that these depictions were part of hunting magic, intended to ensure success, or representations of myths and stories shared within communities. Regardless of their precise purpose, these creations demonstrate abstract thought, planning, and foresight, hallmarks of modern cognition. Humans were beginning to think about their place in the world, to record experiences, and to communicate across generations. Symbolism extended beyond cave walls. Figurines, such as the Venus of Willendorf, Dalny Vestinus figurines, and other small carvings, reflect ideas about fertility, identity, and social structure. These artifacts, often portable, suggest humans were not only creating for immediate surroundings, but also transmitting ideas, beliefs, and values across space and time. Personal ornaments, beads, and pendants indicate aesthetic sense, social signaling, and emerging forms of identity and status within groups. The development of symbolic thought had profound social implications. Shared symbols reinforced group cohesion, encoded knowledge, and created common cultural frameworks. Rituals, including burial practices with grave goods, pigments, or ceremonial arrangements, point to early spiritual or religious thought. Humans were beginning to grapple with concepts of life, death, and meaning, the earliest philosophical questions embedded in material culture. Cultural and symbolic evolution also influenced technological innovation. Humans began crafting composite tools, combining stone, bone, and wood, often with intricate techniques such as hafting or adhesives derived from natural resins. These tools were not only practical, but also reflected cognitive planning, abstract reasoning, and cultural transmission. The creation, refinement, and teaching of these techniques further strengthened group knowledge, allowing innovations to accumulate over generations, a process now recognized as cumulative culture. Language, though difficult to trace directly, likely evolved in tandem with symbolic expression. Gestures, vocalizations, and shared understanding of abstract symbols enabled humans to coordinate hunts, share knowledge, and convey complex ideas. Language and symbolism reinforced one another, laying the foundation for storytelling, oral tradition, and communal memory. The human mind was no longer reacting only to immediate survival pressures. It was projecting, reflecting, and imagining possibilities beyond the present. Artistic and symbolic practices were not uniform across regions, indicating cultural diversity. African cave art differs from European sites. Australian ochre and engravings carry unique styles. Asian sites reveal other distinct patterns. This diversity highlights early cultural adaptation to local environments, social learning, and experimentation. Communities were not isolated intellectually. They were innovators within ecological and social constraints, creating meaning in ways suited to their context. The role of ritual in early human societies cannot be overstated. Rituals organized time, reinforced social norms, and encoded knowledge. They may have involved communal hunts, preparation of ceremonial spaces, or the use of pigments and tools in symbolic activities. Such practices strengthened social cohesion, transmitted behavioral norms, and allowed groups to coordinate action and identity, a critical component of survival and success in the Paleolithic world. Symbolic and cultural evolution also shaped human cognition in profound ways. The capacity to represent concepts, abstract ideas, and experiences externally through art, tools, or ritual allowed humans to think in complex causal chains. They could anticipate events, plan multi-step tasks, and create shared strategies for hunting, foraging, and survival. Cultural innovation became a feedback loop. Creativity generated new tools and behaviors, which reinforced learning, cooperation, and further invention. Material culture also reveals early forms of social hierarchy and organization. Certain objects, pigments, or figurines may have denoted roles, status, or identity within groups. Control of resources, specialized skills, or symbolic authority likely conferred influence. These structures were rudimentary, but represent the beginnings of social stratification and organization that would later define settled societies. Cultural evolution was inseparable from environmental adaptation. Humans used symbolic systems to map landscapes, track seasonal cycles, and encode ecological knowledge. Symbols and art were not only aesthetic but functional, a visual language for survival. Patterns on cave walls, carvings, and portable art may have communicated seasonal movements of game, locations of water sources, or ritualized warnings, blending practical knowledge with imagination. Through cultural and symbolic evolution, humans began to construct a shared worldview. Art, ritual, and symbolic tools created continuity between generations, allowing humans to transcend the limits of immediate experience. Knowledge could be stored, communicated, and refined, leading to increasingly complex social networks and cumulative learning. In this way, the Paleolithic mind transitioned from reactive survival to reflective agency, laying the groundwork for civilization. This period also illustrates the interplay between cognition, creativity, and cooperation. Group success depended on communication, shared knowledge, and coordination, while symbolic behavior reinforced social cohesion. Culture became a tool as vital as any hand axe. It shaped behavior, encoded experience, and allowed humans to manipulate the environment socially and cognitively. Symbolism, therefore, was not ancillary to survival, it was central to it. Cultural and symbolic evolution also hints at emotional depth. Grave goods, decorative pigments, and artistic expression indicate humans felt loss, celebrated life, and sought meaning. Empathy, foresight, and reflection emerge as crucial traits, reinforcing social bonds and collective resilience. Humans were becoming aware of themselves as individuals and as members of a society, capable of projecting identity, intention, and legacy into the world. In contemplating this era, we see that the human mind was awakening. Survival required intelligence, but imagination, planning, and symbolic thought elevated existence beyond mere adaptation. Humans were creating a world both practical and meaningful, where tools and art, fire and ritual combined to enhance survival, cohesion, and creativity. The legacy of cultural and symbolic evolution is profound. It transformed humans from adaptive beings into agents of change, capable of abstract thought, cumulative culture, and intentional social organization. The artifacts of this period, cave paintings, figurines, pigments, and tools, are more than remnants of survival. They are testaments to the emergence of consciousness, culture, and identity. By the end of the Paleolithic, humans were not merely hunters and gatherers. They were storytellers, artists, innovators, and social architects. Each symbolic act, each crafted tool, and each ritual performed laid the groundwork for the Neolithic revolutions to come. The domestication of plants and animals, the rise of settlements, and the first civilizations. Humans had begun to write the first chapters of history with fire, pigment, and imagination. In sum, the cultural and symbolic evolution of Homo sapiens represents the birth of humanity itself. Through art, ritual, and innovation, humans began to define their existence, assert agency over their environment, and create shared meanings that would outlive individual lives. This is the era when survival intersected with creativity, when biology met culture, and when the human mind began to shape not only the world but its own destiny. For millions of years, humans had lived in motion following herds, tracking seasons, and adapting to the unpredictable rhythms of nature. But around 12,000 years ago, in multiple regions across the globe, a profound transformation occurred. Humans learned to settle, cultivate, and domesticate. This epoch, known as the Neolithic Revolution, was not merely a technological shift. It was a profound change in human consciousness, society, and the trajectory of civilization itself. The first seeds of agriculture emerged in fertile river valleys and rich plains, where climatic stability and abundant resources allowed experimentation with wild grains. In the Fertile Crescent, wheat and barley were among the earliest crops to be deliberately sown, harvested, and stored. Similar processes occurred independently in regions such as the Yangtze and Yellow River basins, Mesoamerica, and the Andes, demonstrating a global cognitive leap, the recognition that humans could shape nature to meet their needs. Agriculture brought with it a radical transformation of human life. Instead of wandering in search of food, humans began to settle in one place, creating the first villages. Homes were constructed from mud, stone, or timber, often organized into communal layouts. Hearths, storage facilities, and workshops became permanent features of settlements, signaling a shift from temporary shelters to enduring habitation. Life became less mobile but more structured, and survival strategies expanded from immediate consumption to planning, storage, and resource management. Domestication extended beyond crops. Humans began to tame animals, initially for food, hides, and labor. Sheep, goats, cattle, pigs, and later horses became companions, assets, and instruments of agricultural expansion. Domestication required observation, patience, and innovation. Humans had to understand reproductive cycles, diets, and behaviors. In doing so, they began to manipulate ecosystems, selecting for traits that enhanced productivity and human benefit, a subtle but profound exercise of control over the natural world. With sedentism and agriculture came surplus. Food storage allowed humans to survive seasonal fluctuations, droughts, and famines. Surplus enabled specialization. Not everyone needed to hunt or gather, and some individuals could focus on craft, toolmaking, or ritual. Pottery, for example, emerged as a necessity for storing grains, water, and fermented foods. The production of ceramics required skill, knowledge of fire, and foresight, further reinforcing the cognitive and social sophistication of early communities. Trade networks developed alongside surplus. Grains, tools, ornaments, and other resources were exchanged between villages, connecting groups across vast regions. Trade was not merely economic. It facilitated cultural exchange, the spread of innovation, and social alliances. Through trade, ideas, technologies, and symbolic artifacts traveled far beyond local contexts, creating a web of interlinked human communities that would expand over millennia. The Neolithic Revolution also fostered the rise of social hierarchies. Permanent settlements and surplus resources created conditions for inequality. Certain individuals or families controlled land, stored goods, or specialized skills, accumulating influence and power. Ritual specialists, elders, and emerging leaders began to regulate communal life, mediate conflicts, and oversee collective projects such as irrigation, fortification, or construction. This nascent stratification laid the foundations for the more complex political structures of later civilizations. Technological innovation accelerated. Ground-stone tools replaced flaked implements, allowing more efficient harvesting, woodworking, and construction. Weaving emerged, producing textiles from plant fibers and animal hair. Architecture evolved. Walls, communal spaces, and storage facilities became permanent features of villages. Humans were not merely surviving. They were reshaping their environment deliberately, transforming landscapes to suit collective needs. The cognitive leap of the Neolithic Revolution extended to symbolic and ritual life. Permanent settlements allowed for the development of ceremonial structures, communal rituals, and religious practices tied to agriculture and fertility. Megalithic constructions, altars, and figurines suggest humans were not only thinking about sustenance, but also about cosmic order, community identity, and spiritual meaning. These practices reinforced social cohesion, encoded knowledge, and strengthened group survival. Agricultural life demanded foresight and planning. Humans had to monitor seasonal cycles, predict rainfall, rotate crops, and manage livestock. Knowledge accumulated across generations, creating cultural memory. This knowledge was encoded in tools, rituals, and social practices, becoming a form of early education. Children learn not only survival skills, but also agricultural techniques, craft production, and social norms, all essential for the continuity of village life. Health and nutrition also shifted in the Neolithic. While agriculture provided more predictable food sources, diets became less diverse, often leading to nutritional deficiencies. Sedentism increased exposure to disease and waste accumulation. Yet humans adapted. They developed sanitation strategies, dietary variety through trade, and communal care practices, highlighting ongoing ingenuity in problem-solving and environmental management. The Neolithic Revolution marked the beginning of human environmental manipulation on a large scale. Irrigation systems, terraces, and deforestation reshaped landscapes. Humans transformed rivers, soils, and forests to enhance productivity. While this increased survival and abundance, it also introduced new challenges: soil depletion, water management, and ecological pressures, foreshadowing the complex interplay between human societies and the environment that would define civilization. Settlement patterns reflect strategic thinking. Villages were often located near water sources, fertile land, and trade routes, with defensive considerations against predators and rival groups. Communities developed communal planning, allocating areas for dwellings, workshops, storage, and ritual spaces. This spatial organization demonstrates advanced cognition, social cooperation, and foresight, a deliberate structuring of life to balance survival, productivity, and social cohesion. The Neolithic Revolution was not uniform. Different regions adopted agriculture at different rates, influenced by climate, species availability, and social structures. Yet the underlying principles of cultivation, domestication, settlement, surplus, and social organization emerged globally. Independent innovations in Africa, the Middle East, East Asia, Mesoamerica, and South America demonstrate the universality of human ingenuity when faced with opportunity and necessity. This era also set the stage for the next great leap: urbanization and civilization. By consolidating food production, labor specialization, trade, and ritual practices, Neolithic communities created the conditions for population growth, technological innovation, and complex social structures. The transition from mobile bands to settled villages represents a fundamental shift in human identity, from wanderers responding to the environment to architects shaping it intentionally. In reflecting on the Neolithic Revolution, we see that survival alone was no longer the guiding principle. Humans were planning, experimenting, and innovating, creating structures, systems, and cultural frameworks that would endure for millennia. The mastery of agriculture, the domestication of animals, and the establishment of settlements represent the dawn of civilization, rooted in the lessons of millions of years of adaptation and ingenuity. The birth of settlements is the story of humans taking control of their destiny. It is the story of foresight, cooperation, creativity, and resilience. It is the story of communities emerging from survival, harnessing the forces of nature, and beginning to construct the foundations of society, culture, and history itself. The Neolithic Revolution is the hinge upon which humanity shifted from living in the world to actively shaping it, from adaptation to agency, from survival to civilization. Asterisk, by the time the Neolithic Revolution was well underway, humans had crossed a threshold. Survival alone was no longer sufficient. Humans had begun to reshape reality with intellect, foresight, and innovation. This era marks a technological and cognitive leap, when ingenuity and planning became the primary instruments of survival and societal transformation. Stone tools had evolved far beyond the crude flakes of the Paleolithic. Humans mastered polished and ground stone tools, producing axes, adzes, chisels, and mortars that could cut timber, shape dwellings, and process food with unprecedented efficiency. These tools were no longer merely reactive. They were designed with intention, anticipating specific tasks and outcomes. The refinement of metallurgy in some regions, beginning with copper and eventually bronze, further expanded human capabilities, enabling construction, craft specialization, and trade. Architecture emerged as both a practical and symbolic expression. Permanent dwellings, defensive structures, storage facilities, and ceremonial spaces appeared across Neolithic villages. Early structures at sites such as Catalhoyuk in Anatolia and Skara in Orkney demonstrate sophisticated planning, spatial organization, and communal coordination. Walls, hearths, and storage spaces were integrated deliberately, reflecting cognitive foresight and social cooperation. Humans were not only shaping their immediate environment, but also projecting order, stability, and identity into the landscape. Weaving, another transformative technology, enabled the production of textiles for clothing, storage, and insulation. Fibers from plants, animal hair, and reeds were twisted, braided, and woven into durable materials, offering protection against the elements and enhancing the quality of life. Weaving also carried symbolic significance, reflecting social identity, craftsmanship, and aesthetic sensibility. It represented the intersection of practical necessity, creative skill, and cognitive complexity. Food storage became essential in settled communities. Surplus crops and preserved foods ensured resilience against seasonal scarcity, drought, or crop failure. Humans developed granaries, pits, and pottery vessels to store grains, legumes, and other staples. The planning and management of resources required foresight, record-keeping, and knowledge transmission. These practices exemplify early strategic intelligence, transforming immediate survival into long-term security and planning. The cognitive leap of this period is perhaps best understood through the lens of innovation and cumulative culture. Humans were building on the knowledge of previous generations, refining techniques, and inventing new solutions. Knowledge of tool-making, agriculture, and resource management was transmitted socially, preserved, and improved. This cumulative learning accelerated human progress, creating a feedback loop in which cognition and culture reinforced one another. Hunting and subsistence strategies also evolved. While agriculture provided the staple diet, humans continued to hunt, fish, and forage, integrating multiple food sources for security and diversity. Composite tools, such as bows, arrows, and spears with hafted points, increased efficiency and safety. Fishing technologies, including nets, traps, and harpoons, expanded coastal and riverine exploitation. Humans were diversifying strategies, combining intelligence, planning, and innovation to maximize survival and productivity. Trade networks expanded dramatically during this era. Villages and emerging towns became nodes of exchange, linking regions and cultures. Obsidian, flint, shells, pigments, and other materials traveled hundreds of kilometers, along with knowledge, techniques, and symbolic artifacts. Trade was not merely transactional. It facilitated cross-cultural innovation, communication, and social alliances, reinforcing human adaptability and collective intelligence. The Neolithic cognitive leap also includes conceptual and symbolic innovation. Ritual and ceremonial structures, such as Stonehenge, Göbekli Tepe, and megalithic tombs, demonstrate planning, collaboration, and abstract thinking. Humans were engaging with time, astronomy, and social identity, embedding knowledge and meaning into built environments. These constructions required coordination, foresight, labor management, and symbolic vision, a profound expansion of human cognitive and social capacity. The emergence of counting, measurement, and early record-keeping reflects practical and abstract thought. Tokens, marks on bones, and symbolic representations indicate awareness of quantity, trade, and resource management. Mathematics and numeracy were born from necessity, but they also structured cognition, enabling humans to plan, calculate, and organize communities effectively. The mind was no longer just reacting. It was anticipating, analyzing, and designing solutions for the future. Clothing, housing, and craft specialization advanced further. Humans produced woven textiles, sewn garments, and protective layers adapted to local climates. They built homes with multiple rooms, storage spaces, and functional design, reflecting both practicality and comfort. Specialized craftspeople produced pottery, tools, ornaments, and ritual objects, suggesting division of labor, skill refinement, and economic organization. Communities were transforming from egalitarian bands to interdependent societies with roles, responsibilities, and expertise. Fire and energy management became central. Controlled fire facilitated cooking, heating, and craft production. Charcoal, kilns, and hearth management reflect engineering intelligence, combining knowledge of materials, heat, and technique. Fire also played social and symbolic roles, shaping communal life, rituals, and storytelling. Humans were manipulating both material and social environments with deliberate intention. Education and knowledge transmission were equally transformative. Skills were taught through apprenticeship, observation, and demonstration. Children learned agriculture, toolmaking, weaving, hunting, and ritual practice. This socialized learning ensured cultural continuity and cumulative advancement, reinforcing the feedback loop between cognition, culture, and survival. Knowledge was no longer incidental. It was a conscious investment in future generations. The cognitive and technological leap of this period also fostered environmental understanding. Humans managed soils, water, plants, and animals, developing techniques that would form the basis of early ecology. Irrigation, crop rotation, selective breeding, and animal husbandry exemplify human capacity to manipulate complex systems. Humans were not merely surviving in ecosystems. They were engineering them for sustenance, stability, and expansion. Symbolic expression continued to flourish alongside technological advances. Ceramics were decorated with motifs, weaving displayed patterns and identity, and ritual spaces reflected cosmology and social hierarchy. Art, technology, and society were intertwined, demonstrating that the human mind was capable of integrating survival, aesthetics, and abstract thought into cohesive systems. By the end of this era, humans had achieved a qualitative transformation. Tools, structures, textiles, food management, trade, and social organization reflected a species capable of planning, coordinating, and innovating across multiple domains. Humans had not only mastered their environment, but had begun to project intention and meaning onto it. Survival was intertwined with foresight, creativity, and social complexity. The technological and cognitive leap of the Neolithic period is the foundation for all subsequent human achievements. It is the moment when Homo sapiens became architects of their own destiny, combining biology, intellect, and culture to reshape the world. Fire, stone, fiber, grain, and stone structures were no longer mere implements. They were tools of agency, expression, and legacy. Humans were inventing civilization itself, guided by intelligence, cooperation, and vision. In contemplating this era, one realizes that the Neolithic leap was more than innovation. It was a transformation of consciousness. Humans were thinking about tomorrow, about community, about permanence. They were integrating survival, culture, and cognition in ways that would define humanity for millennia. From polished stone to granaries, from weaving to ceremonial structures, the Neolithic era represents the intersection of intellect, imagination, and purpose, the dawn of human mastery over both environment and self. Through these technological and cognitive achievements, humans became strategic planners, social organizers, and creative thinkers. Each tool, structure, and symbolic act was a step toward a world consciously constructed rather than passively endured. This era solidified the foundation for urbanization, literacy, complex societies, and civilization. Humans were no longer just inheritors of evolution. They were authors of their own history. Asterisk asterisk, long before maps existed, before kingdoms and borders, humans began to move. Not as conquerors, not as invaders, but as explorers of necessity, curiosity, and survival. The story of human migration is the story of our species dispersing across the planet, confronting diverse climates, landscapes, and challenges, and adapting with ingenuity, resilience, and creativity. Africa, the cradle of humanity, was where this journey began. Around 200,000 to 300,000 years ago, anatomically modern humans Homo sapiens emerged, initially restricted to the eastern and southern regions of the continent. Yet as populations grew and resources fluctuated, humans began to venture beyond Africa, crossing rivers, deserts, and savannas, encountering new ecosystems that demanded innovation. The first great exodus from Africa likely occurred around 70,000 years ago. Humans followed coastlines, river valleys, and favorable corridors, gradually populating the Middle East, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. Archaeological evidence, including stone tools, shell middens, and early settlements, marks these pathways. Humans carried knowledge, technology, and culture with them. Tools, fire, language, and ritual practices, allowing them to survive in unfamiliar environments. Adaptation was critical. In temperate forests, humans developed strategies for hunting smaller game, gathering plant resources, and exploiting seasonal cycles. In arid deserts, they learned to locate water, track migratory species, and manage food scarcity. In highlands and mountains, clothing, shelter, and controlled fire became indispensable. Across these environments, humans demonstrated phenotypic flexibility and behavioral innovation, adjusting diet, mobility, and social organization to suit local conditions. Europe and Asia presented particular challenges. Ice Age climates produced extreme cold, fluctuating sea levels, and glacial landscapes. Humans confronted mammoths, reindeer, and formidable predators, often competing with Neanderthals, who already inhabited these regions. Archaeological and genetic evidence indicate encounters were complex, sometimes hostile, sometimes cooperative. Humans adopted clothing, shelters, hunting strategies, and toolkits suited to these environments, demonstrating rapid innovation under pressure. The migration into Australia, likely around 65,000 years ago, required remarkable ingenuity. Humans crossed open water, using rafts or simple boats, navigating coastlines and currents. Once there, they adapted to tropical forests, arid interiors, and coastal zones, developing specialized tools, fishing techniques, and social systems. These migrations illustrate the combination of courage, planning, and environmental intelligence that characterized early human expansion. The settlement of the Americas, much later, around 20,000 to 15,000 years ago, marks one of the most extraordinary chapters in migration. Humans traversed glacial corridors or coastal routes from Siberia into North America, eventually spreading across the continent. They confronted tundra, forests, rivers, and deserts, adapting hunting strategies to new megafauna mammoths, mastodons, giant sloths, and later developing agriculture and sedentary communities. These movements reflect adaptation, resilience, and the ability to innovate under extreme conditions. Migration was not merely physical, it involved cultural transmission. Along migration routes, humans carried technologies, rituals, artistic expression, and social norms. Stone tools, pottery styles, decorative ornaments, and symbolic practices spread across vast distances, creating networks of shared knowledge. Genetic evidence confirms interbreeding with Neanderthals and Denisovans, highlighting encounters that shaped human biology, diversity, and adaptation. Humans were evolving both culturally and genetically in response to movement and interaction. Environmental challenges shaped migration patterns profoundly. Ice ages lowered sea levels, exposing land bridges such as Beringia, enabling entry into the Americas. Climate warming created fertile corridors and floodplains, attracting populations and fostering settlement. Humans learned to exploit seasonal abundance, store food, and manage resources collectively. Migration was therefore a combination of exploration, adaptation, and survival strategy, requiring both intelligence and social coordination. Social organization facilitated migration. Bands and extended families traveled together, sharing knowledge, labor, and protection. Cooperation was vital in hunting, foraging, and navigating unfamiliar landscapes. Leadership, role differentiation, and communication emerged as critical tools for ensuring group success. Knowledge of terrain, seasonal cycles, and survival techniques was accumulated and transmitted through oral tradition, storytelling, and ritual, reinforcing cumulative culture across generations. Innovation accompanied migration. Humans developed region-specific tools, clothing, shelters, and subsistence strategies. In colder regions, tailored clothing, insulated shelters, and specialized hunting weapons were critical. In tropical or coastal regions, fishing nets, traps, and watercraft facilitated the exploitation of resources. Humans were not passive observers. They actively engineered survival, combining cognitive foresight, technological skill, and social organization to thrive in diverse habitats. The spread of humans also influenced ecosystems. Megafauna extinctions in the Americas and Australia coincide with human arrival, suggesting the ecological impact of hunting, fire management, and environmental modification. Humans were becoming agents of ecological transformation, demonstrating the capacity to reshape landscapes intentionally or unintentionally. This interplay between biology, culture, and environment would define humanity's influence on the planet for millennia. Migration also accelerated cultural diversity. Populations separated by geography developed distinct languages, artistic styles, rituals, and technologies. Yet commonalities, such as tool-making techniques, symbolic practices, and subsistence strategies, point to shared cognitive and cultural heritage. Human societies were diversifying, yet interconnected through innovation, adaptation, and social learning. Genetic studies reveal that modern humans carry the signatures of these migrations. Variations in skin pigmentation, immunity, and physiology reflect adaptation to diverse climates and diets. Interactions with archaic humans introduced genetic diversity that enhanced resilience and survival. Migration, therefore, was both biological and cultural evolution, shaping who we are today. The global spread of humans culminated in the emergence of permanent settlements, agriculture, and early civilizations, but the spirit of exploration, adaptation, and resilience remained embedded in human nature. Migration forged the networks, skills, and knowledge that enabled subsequent technological and social leaps. Humans became architects of their own destiny, traversing oceans, deserts, and ice, leaving footprints across continents that testify to courage, intelligence, and ingenuity. In reflecting on this journey, one recognizes that migration was more than survival. It was a testament to curiosity, adaptability, and the human drive to explore. Humans were expanding not just physically, but also cognitively, socially, and culturally. Each step into unknown lands, each encounter with new environments, each innovation to solve a survival problem, laid the groundwork for the interconnected, global human story that continues today. The migration and global spread of humans is a story of resilience, innovation, and interconnection. It demonstrates that humans are defined by movement, adaptation, and the ability to learn and cooperate. Across ice, desert, jungle, and sea, Humans carried tools, ideas, culture, and genes, transforming landscapes and themselves. This era is the crucible in which modern humanity was forged, adaptable, inventive, and ever-expanding. Through these migrations, humans learned that survival was inseparable from innovation, cooperation, and social intelligence. Humans shaped environments and were in turn shaped by them, a dynamic interplay that continues to define the species. The global dispersal of Homo sapiens is the story of humanity's first steps toward a connected, adaptive, and culturally rich world, a story written in bones, tools, artifacts, and the enduring traces of our ancestors' journeys. Asterisk. The story of prehistoric humans is not merely a tale of survival. It is the story of becoming. From the first tentative footprints in the mud of African savannas to the sparks of fire lighting dark caves, from the crude stone tools of early hominins to the polished axes, granaries, and woven textiles of the Neolithic, humanity's journey is one of ingenuity, resilience, and transformation. Every era we have traversed, from Australopithecus to Homo sapiens, from Paleolithic hunters to Neolithic settlers, reveals the unfolding of intelligence, creativity, and social complexity. Each species contributed to the foundation of human experience. The first upright steps, the shaping of stone into tools, the discovery of fire, the painting of walls with symbolic meaning, the domestication of plants and animals, and the deliberate construction of settlements. These milestones are more than historical markers. They are testaments to the evolution of mind, culture, and consciousness. Reflecting on this journey, one sees that survival was only the beginning. The emergence of symbolic thought, ritual, and art demonstrates that humans were seeking meaning, expressing identity, and communicating across time. Cave paintings, figurines, decorated tools, and early ceremonial structures are not merely artifacts. They are the earliest evidence of the human desire to understand the world, to connect with others, and to leave a trace that transcends mortality. The Paleolithic mind was alive with curiosity and creativity. Humans experimented with materials, refined techniques, and innovated solutions to challenges posed by climate, predators, and scarcity. Fire, toolmaking, hunting strategies, and social cooperation reveal a species learning to project intention and foresight, transforming immediate circumstances into structured strategies for survival. The Neolithic Revolution marked the deliberate mastery of nature. Humans planted seeds, domesticated animals, and constructed permanent settlements. They stored food, managed resources, and organized labor, creating societies capable of planning and sustaining themselves over time. Technology and cognition were inseparable innovations, from pottery to weaving to architectural planning. They were a reflection of human foresight, intelligence, and the collective will to endure. Migration and global dispersal expanded the horizons of humanity. Across deserts, mountains, and oceans, humans adapted to diverse climates, forged new technologies, and integrated knowledge from encounters with other human species. They created networks of trade, exchanged ideas, and diversified cultural practices. These migrations demonstrate that adaptation and exploration are fundamental to human identity, that movement, curiosity, and resilience are at the core of what it means to be human. Throughout prehistory, humans were more than passive observers of their environment. They were architects, engineers, and strategists, shaping landscapes, ecosystems, and societies. They innovated not only for survival, but for comfort, expression, and communal cohesion. From early huts to ceremonial structures, from stone axes to woven textiles, every creation reflects deliberate thought, planning, and social coordination. Humans were designing the conditions of their existence. Symbolism and culture became the lens through which humans interpreted the world. Rituals, art, language, and social norms allowed individuals to communicate ideas, share knowledge, and build communities. These practices forged social bonds, identity, and continuity, ensuring that experience and learning could extend beyond a single lifetime. Culture became a tool as vital as any weapon or tool, shaping thought, behavior, and collective survival. The prehistoric era also illustrates the human capacity for empathy, cooperation, and foresight. Care for the sick, burial of the dead, and social coordination during hunts reveal a species aware of others and capable of collective action. Intelligence was not only cognitive but also social. The ability to navigate relationships, share knowledge, and work together for common goals. This social intelligence became a cornerstone of human evolution and the foundation of civilizations to come. Prehistoric humans were constantly negotiating the tension between environment and ingenuity. They confronted extreme cold, searing heat, scarce resources, and dangerous predators. Yet they adapted, innovated, and endured. Fire, tools, clothing, and shelter were not luxuries. They were instruments of survival and expressions of human problem-solving and creativity. Every challenge surmounted was a step toward mastery over the world and over themselves. The cumulative impact of millions of years of human experience is profound. Each generation learned, adapted, and transmitted knowledge, creating a feedback loop of cultural and technological accumulation. Innovations compounded, enabling humans to survive in ever more challenging environments, expand into new territories, and lay the groundwork for agriculture, settlements, and eventually civilization. Humanity's story is thus not linear but a tapestry of trial, failure, success, and ingenuity, woven across millennia. The legacy of prehistoric humans is not confined to tools, bones, or artifacts. It resides in the very structures of thought, society, and creativity that define us today. Our languages, our social norms, our technologies, and our capacity for imagination trace their roots to these early epochs. The ability to plan, create, communicate, and collaborate, hallmarks of modern life, were honed in caves, forests, plains, and villages by humans learning to survive, adapt, and innovate. Reflecting on this legacy, one realizes that the story of prehistoric humans is the story of human potential realized under pressure. The transition from instinct to strategy, from reaction to foresight, from survival to culture, and from movement to settlement, represents the gradual awakening of human agency. Prehistoric humans were the architects not only of survival, but of consciousness itself. The echoes of their lives resonate in every aspect of modern existence. The first paintings on cave walls anticipated the power of visual storytelling. The first polished tools foreshadowed engineering and invention. The first granaries and settlements laid the blueprint for civilization. Even the earliest migrations anticipate humanity's drive to explore, connect, and understand the world. Prehistoric humans were the prelude to history, the first authors of human destiny. Ultimately, the prehistoric era teaches that humanity is defined by adaptation, creativity, and social cooperation. Each spark of fire, each carved symbol, each domesticated seed, and each migration route is a testament to the resilience and ingenuity of our ancestors. Their lives were a continuous negotiation with the environment, a deliberate shaping of reality, and a relentless pursuit of survival intertwined with meaning. In contemplating the prehistoric journey, we see more than a chronological sequence of events. We see the emergence of mind, culture, and civilization. From footprints to fire, from tools to art, from migration to settlement, humans were learning to master not only their surroundings, but themselves. Every discovery, every adaptation, every communal act contributed to the architecture of human existence. The story of prehistoric humans is thus a story of becoming. They were not merely ancestors. They were innovators, thinkers, and creators, laying the foundations for the societies, technologies, and cultures that would define our species. Their legacy is embedded in our DNA, our minds, and the material and symbolic worlds we inhabit today. As we close the chapter on prehistory, it is clear that every tool, every flame, every cave painting, every settlement, and every migration was a step toward the world we know. The prehistoric humans forged the pathways of thought, culture, and survival that continue to guide us. Their struggles, triumphs, and innovations are the genesis of what it means to be human, a testament to creativity, resilience, and the enduring capacity of our species to shape both reality and destiny.